Welcome to Nuremberg. The medieval city center is a real tourist hotspot. But Nuremberg was also linked to the Nazi era. Hitler was celebrated here at the Nuremberg rallies. Right here behind me, the Nuremberg trials began in November 1945.
For the first time in history, war criminals, high-ranking Nazi officials, were brought before an international court.
Why did all this happen in Nuremberg? What still reminds us of its dark past? Join me on my search for answers.
We visit the courtroom that captured the world's attention in 1945. We explore the old town, which the Nazis exploited for their own purposes. And we'll see the gigantic Nazi party rally grounds that Hitler built to host his propaganda events. We start in the old town. You'll find half-timbered houses, Gothic churches, towers and bridges. And towering above it all is the old imperial castle. But you also see many houses with bland, functional facades built in the post-war period. You can't tell by looking at Nuremberg today, but by the end of World War II, the city center was almost completely destroyed. And yet, there were exceptions.
The huge Palace of Justice was relatively undamaged.
The Palace of Justice had around 80 courtrooms, more than 500 offices, and a prison in the immediate vicinity.
So it was the perfect place for the big international trial led by the four Allied powers.
The trial began on November 20th, 1945, just a few months after the end of the war. Today the site is home to the Memorium Nuremberg Trials Documentation Center.
You can actually visit the main site of the trial. Behind this door is Courtroom 600.
The hall seems small and quiet today, but in fact, the International Military Tribunal took place over more than 10 months. The Allies, the US, the Soviet Union, Great Britain and France, each provided a judge and a chief prosecutor. "21 high-ranking representatives of the Nazi regime stood trial. Among them was Hermann Göring, Commander-in-Chief of the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force. Rudolf Hess, Hitler's deputy. And Albert Speer, architect and Minister of Armaments. Hitler himself had committed suicide, while other high-ranking Nazis had gone into hiding. Political scientist Sophia Brostean-Kaiser shows me room 600. The defendants sat on this bench on the left. Back in 1945, the room was much larger than it is today. The Americans expanded it to accommodate the large number of people. Later in the 1960s, the room was made smaller again. Apart from the doorways, nothing is original.
Why did famous writers like John Steinbeck, Erika Mann or Erich Kästner come here? Why was there so much interest, international interest?
Well, it was for the first time in history that individual persons were put to justice for the crimes they committed in the name of a state. So usually after a war ended, what would you do with the people who lost the war? You would probably just, make a short process with them or just execute them. But here the Allied powers said, no, we do not want to take revenge, we want to serve justice. So we make this huge trial here, a fair trial to give them a chance, but also to document all the crimes that they committed and to put this word all over the world. So they invited lots and lots of media to make this known, to teach the Germans but also the rest of the world about the crimes the Nazis committed here.
What were the men charged with?
Well, they were charged with all the crimes that you can imagine. I mean, today we know so much about what happened in World War II, about the crimes they also committed, not just during the war and during the attacks, but also in the occupied zones. We're talking about murder, extinction, the concentration and extermination camps that were built, about discrimination and persecution of people, of populations. They tried to put that all together. So the Allied powers, they had this challenge to put all these crimes into judicial terms.
And did it work? What do you think?
It was a successful try. They brought it to an end. They had verdicts, and all in all, you can say it worked really well. Of course, there were minor things that you can criticize, but if you look at the big picture, this was a huge step towards civilization, that these four Allied powers worked together, that they put aside the differences and committed to this huge thing. So yes, it was a success.
In what way would you say did this trial change the world, change the course of history?
Well, you can see so many traces of that from this one single moment in history. For example, right after the war, we had the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, the Genocide Convention, the Nuremberg Principles. These are all things that result from Nuremberg here, from these things that happened. But also later, in the 1990s, there was the ICTY and the ICTR, the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, and International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda. And then later in 2002, finally the ICC, the International Criminal Court.
The exhibition at the Memorial provides further information about the main Nuremberg trial. It ended on October 1st, 1946. 12 defendants were sentenced to death, 3 to life imprisonment. 4 defendants received long prison sentences. 3 were acquitted. After this main trial, there were 12 follow-up trials in Nuremberg. Standing before the court were industrialists, lawyers, and doctors who were considered perpetrators and profiteers of the Nazi regime. I found it interesting that there was also an international military tribunal in Tokyo for crimes committed in the Asia-Pacific region during the war. While the largely intact Palace of Justice made Nuremberg a practical choice for the trials, the city also carried considerable symbolic weight.
In no other city were Hitler and the Nazis celebrated as much as here in Nuremberg.
The city hosted large Nazi party rallies where Hitler and his followers glorified themselves and showcased their power. In 1935, the city also saw the enactment of the Nuremberg race laws, which began the systematic persecution of Jews and laid the groundwork for the Holocaust.
Nuremberg was one of Hitler's favorite cities, and one reason for that goes way back in history.
The imperial castle is around 1,000 years old and symbolizes the city's medieval importance. In 1356, Emperor Charles IV decreed that every newly elected emperor must hold his first imperial diet in Nuremberg. As a result, emperors, kings, and electors gathered here repeatedly over the centuries. The Frauenkirche's mechanical clock reminds us of this every day at noon on the main market square. In this show, 7 electors walk past Emperor Charles IV. These were the ones who elected the next emperor. As a result, the Glockenspiel is commonly called Männleinlaufen, which means little men running. You might recognize the Frauenkirche. Every year, the Christkind steps onto its balcony to open Nuremberg's beloved Christmas market, a tradition watched by audiences worldwide. Next to the Frauenkirche, there's another eye-catcher on the main market square or Hauptmarkt. The Schöner Brunnen, or Beautiful Fountain, is a medieval gem tourists love. According to legend, if you spin this ring once, you are granted 3 wishes. If you spin it 3 times, you'll have many children. Here I meet up with city guide Werner Fiederer. He works for the association Geschichte für alle, History for Everyone. It offers city tours focusing on Nuremberg's Nazi past. Some take you through the old town.
They say that Nuremberg was Hitler's favorite city. If so, then why?
Well, in fact, that's true. Nuremberg was Hitler's favorite town. That was mainly due to its really outstanding medieval character that the city had by 1933. You got to know that Nuremberg in the Middle Ages was not only any city. It was the biggest, the richest and the most influential town in the so-called Holy Roman Empire of German Asia. And therefore it was the perfect backdrop for Adolf Hitler for the propaganda purposes.
Why did they have the focus on the medieval times? What was so fascinating about that?
First of all, of course, the medieval architecture, all these half-timbered houses, the steep roofs, the Gothic churches, that gave, according to the Nazis, it was sort of a typical national German architecture, first of all. Second, the political meaning of Nuremberg was also outstanding. Nuremberg was the town where every newly elected king held his first Reichstag. And Hitler wanted to build a bridge from the Middle Ages to the Third Reich, from the city of the Reichstag to the city of the Reichsparteitag.
The Nazis back then kind of twisted and changed the history of this town. What did they do and why?
Well, it was all about to show Nuremberg's history in an idealized, romantically glorified form. To show Nuremberg like a model city of the most German of all German cities. So everything that was in the way that did not fit to the historical appearance was redesigned or removed or demolished. So for example, the big Neptune fountain on the market square that was in the way, it was considered to be un-German. A few buildings were completely redesigned according to the historical appearance. And for example, also the Jewish synagogue, which was a little bit upstream from here, was finally then also completely destroyed and demolished in 1938 because of its un-German appearance.
And what about the Christ Child prologue? A big thing here in Nuremberg, very traditional every year. In what way is that linked to the Nazis?
In fact, it was the former mayor of town in 1933, Willy Liebel, who ordered the market, the Christmas market, to come back to the market square. It was relocated for a while on an island up there due to high traffic volume. But then he ordered it to come back to the market square in 1933. And in that year also a new opening ceremony was introduced for the first time. And there was for the first time a real Christ child accompanied by 2 tinsel angels and a lot of light and sound spectacle that held a prologue in the sense of the Nazi ideology still, of course. And this tradition is still used today. So still today the prologue of the Christ Child takes place on the same spot, on the balcony in front of the Church of Our Dear Lady. However, we have to know it's a completely other wording now.
The Nazis also used the Frauenkirche and the market square for their Reich Party rallies. The military parades against the medieval backdrop were captured in the Nazi propaganda film Triumph of the Will, which director Leni Riefenstahl shot on Hitler's behalf during the 1934 Nazi party rally. Enthusiasm for the so-called Führer was high. World War II and the destruction of the city were still years away. As beautiful as the old town is, it wasn't big enough for Hitler. He planned marches on a much larger scale. For this reason, a huge area was developed in the southeast of the city, the Nazi party rally grounds. It was designed according to the plans of Hitler's favorite architect, Albert Speer. It takes just under 30 minutes by tram from the city center to get to the documentation center. It is part of a monumental building, the Congress Hall. It's an example of the Nazis' megalomania, which was also reflected in their architecture. Today, the city uses many rooms in the building, and a new event hall is currently being built in the inner courtyard. A circular path provides information about the individual buildings on the Nazi Party rally grounds. There are information boards in German and English at each stop. You can explore the area on foot or, like me, rent a bike at the Congress Hall. I ride past remnants of Nazi architecture, but above all there are many large empty spaces.
I'm really happy that I took the bike. The area is huge.
During the Nazi era, the Reich Party rally grounds covered 11 square kilometers, 4 of which exist today. Back then, there was even a huge tent camp for the participants. The Nazi Party rallies took place every year in September and usually lasted 8 days. The last one attracted 500,000 participants. There were folk festivals, concerts, and fireworks.
Mostly there were mass marches and military shows, praising the Führer and prepping for war.
Part of the site was the Luitpold Arena. 150,000 SA and SS men marched here. The Zeppelin field could accommodate 200,000 participants. One of its special features was the so-called Cathedral of Light. 130 anti-aircraft searchlights shone vertically into the sky. The aim of all these productions was not only to have Hitler's ideology understood, but also to be felt and experienced. Other parade grounds and large-scale projects were planned, but never completed. My tour ends back at the Congress Hall. It was designed to hold 50,000 people, but was also never finished. In 1939, Hitler invaded Poland and World War II began. There were no more Nazi Party rallies, and the resources for the gigantic construction projects were needed at the front. The Documentation Center has an exhibition that provides detailed information about the rise and fall of the Nazis. It also covers the special role that Nuremberg played in this.
Here in Nuremberg, the Nazis showed off their power and later faced their end in the war crimes trials. What do you think about it? Did you like this tour? Feel free to leave a comment.